4 years into Vladimir Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the war has undergone a radical paradigm-shifting transformation. In mid-2026, the skies over Moscow did not turn black from a natural disaster, but from the thick, acrid smoke of its largest oil refinery detonated by a swarm of Ukrainian long-range strike drones. For the Kremlin, this is the ultimate geopolitical nightmare. An operation originally drawing boarded to last just 3 days has devolved into a protracted attritional quagmire. More importantly, the strategic depth Russia relied on for security has evaporated. Vladimir Putin is systematically losing control of his country's economic and military equilibrium. How did the world's self-proclaimed second most powerful military find itself paralyzed on its own soil? The answer lies not in a single blunder, but in a profound shift in the very geometry of modern warfare. To understand the crisis facing the Russian armed forces in 2026, we must chart the physical erosion of the front lines. In February 2022, Moscow launched a multi-axis blitzkrieg pouring armor from Belarus, Donbas, and Crimea. By late March of that year, Russia controlled more sovereign Ukrainian territory than it ever would again. The turning point arrived in the autumn of 2022. During the legendary Kharkiv counteroffensive, Ukrainian forces recaptured 6,000 square kilometers in mere days, advancing at a breathtaking clip of over 7 kilometers per day. This operation defied classic Soviet doctrine and shattered the myth of Russian military invincibility. Weeks later, Kherson fell, forcing a humiliating Russian retreat across the Dnipro River. Since that focal point, the map has congealed into stagnant, bloody trench warfare. Throughout 2023, Russian gains ground to a near halt, taking just 465 square kilometers. Their sole major prize was Bakhmut, a minor logistics hub that required 10 months of meat grinder tactics, catastrophic casualties, and total urban devastation to secure. In the first 4 months of 2026, the daily rate of Russian territorial gains collapsed to a negligible 2.9 kilometers per day across the entire front line, a staggering drop from nearly 10 kilometers per day during the same period in 2025. In April 2026, the Russian ledger entered the negative, recording a net loss of 116 square kilometers. Historically, Russia relies on a seasonal rhythm. Offensive operations sag in the muddy spring, only to aggressively resurge in May and June. But in 2026, that summer surge never came. The seasonal engine of the Russian army didn't just stall, it sputtered out completely. The culprit isn't weather or terrain, it is the absolute robotification of the battle space. When Russian commanders order small infantry squads forward to probe for weak seams in the Ukrainian lines, they are sending men into a lethal digital panopticon. The sky is saturated. Reconnaissance UAVs feed real-time telemetry to automated artillery batteries. Low-cost FPV drones slip through the tree lines, while fiber-optic jam-resistant quadcopters hunt individual vehicles with terrifying precision. What once was a calculated infantry assault is now an execution order carried out one squad at a time. This has broken the traditional mathematics of land warfare. For centuries, the side that could field more bodies won the war of attrition. Moscow banked its entire strategy on this premise. However, when a theater is defended by 20,000 highly trained, technologically enabled drone operators, massive waves of poorly trained conscripts become irrelevant. The manpower crisis is hitting Russia at its core. Budgetary and recruitment data reveal that Moscow signed up just over 71,000 men in the first quarter of 2026 compared to nearly 90,000 during the same window in 2025. Russia is losing men on the front line faster than it can recruit them, creating a deficit that is structurally unsustainable. Ukraine's ability to out-innovate a nuclear superpower is rooted in a massive industrial pivot. According to data from the KSC Institute, Ukraine's domestic production of PV drones skyrocketed from a few thousand in 2022 to an astonishing 3 million units in 2025. By early 2026, Ukraine's annualized production capacity surged past 8 million drones. On a per capita basis, Ukraine is outproducing Russia by a ratio of nearly 9-1. This industrial agility has radically altered air defense economics. Previously, Ukraine had to expend multi-million-dollar Patriot or NASAMS interceptors to down cheap imported Shahed drones. Today, they utilize domestic interceptor drones like the Sting. Costing a mere $2,000 apiece, Ukrainian factories are churning out up to 1,000 of these aerial interceptors every single day, neutralizing Russia's tactical aviation advantage at a fraction of the cost. Simultaneously, Kyiv has perfected what military analysts call the mid-range strategy. This targets a vital 150-kilometer band behind the Russian front lines. Instead of hunting individual tanks, Ukrainian long-range assets are systematically strangling Russian logistics fuel depots and ammunition dumps. Nowhere is this more apparent than the land corridor to occupied Crimea. The R-280 highway, the primary overland artery designed to sustain Russian forces on the southern front, has been transformed into a mechanized graveyard. Russian logistics units have been forced to abandon large transport convoys, switching to smaller, less efficient civilian trucks, or crawling along unpaved back roads to avoid drone surveillance. This constant grinding tax on Russian movement has severely delayed the delivery of fuel and artillery shells to the front lines. To counter this, Russia has attempted to scale up its own elite drone units, such as the Rubicon detachment. However, the Kremlin's rigid bureaucratic structure has crippled its effectiveness. In an effort to artificially double their drone force, the Russian military slashed training standards, lowered entrance requirements, and pulled recruits from the same depleted infantry pools. The result is a flood of poorly trained operators who lack the tactical fluidity of their Ukrainian counterparts. Inside the Kremlin, the disconnect from reality is staggering. According to former senior intelligence officials, Vladimir Putin has resorted to extreme micromanagement, demanding operational briefings from Chief of the General Staff Valery Gerasimov up to twice a day. Over 2 decades, Putin built a system that ruthlessly purged independent thinkers, replacing them with hyper-loyalists. Now caught in an echo chamber of their own making, Russian intelligence services systematically falsify battlefield data, feeding the executive branch fabricated victories to protect their own positions. This public facade fractured during a recent Kremlin event. where frontline soldiers directly confronted Putin, demanding to know when Russia would field an answer to Elon Musk's Starlink network, which anchors Ukraine's battlefield communications. Putin claimed Russia was deploying a rival system known as RASVET. However, independent assessments reveal that only 16 test units have been launched, and the system will not achieve full operational capacity until at least 2030. Caught off guard, Putin defaulted to familiar geopolitical rhetoric, launching into a historical tirade, invoking Napoleon Hitler and the collective threat of NATO. It is the behavior of a leadership that has run out of technical solutions and is retreating into historical mythology. Yet Kiev's strategic response has been surgical targeting, the literal lifeblood of the Russian state, its petrochemical infrastructure. The drone strikes on oil refineries are not symbolic. They are a highly calculated economic strangulation campaign. By mid-2026, independent audits confirm that Ukrainian long-range strike drones have knocked out roughly 20% of Russia's total oil refining capacity. Over 83 million tons of annual refining volume have been taken offline, wiping out a quarter of Russia's domestic diesel supply and 30% of its gasoline production. In a single month, over 20 coordinated strikes reduced Russian refinery runs to their lowest levels in 16 years, forcing the Kremlin to slash crude production by 400,000 barrels per day. Ukrainian engineers are deliberately targeting specialized industrial bottlenecks, such as Western-designed hydrocrackers. Because of strict international sanctions, Russia cannot procure the advanced replacement parts needed to repair these units, turning temporary damage into permanent structural decay. For the first time, the Russian Energy Ministry publicly admitted severe fuel supply complications. When the Kremlin admits vulnerability, the crisis is absolute. As a result of these compounding failures, whispers of a second wave of mass mobilization are growing within Moscow. But repeating the 2022 mobilization would be a catastrophic mistake. The previous draft triggered an exodus of nearly 1 million tech-literate working-age citizens. Doing so again in 2026 would permanently collapse Russia's fractured labor market. More fundamentally, a mass draft yields the wrong kind of soldiers. The modern Ukrainian battlefield doesn't care about sheer numbers of infantry. It is dominated by technical expertise, electronic warfare proficiency, and engineering. Mass mobilization would merely feed more men into an unforgiving digital slaughterhouse. When we synthesize the strategic data of 2026, the structural trajectory becomes clear. Ukraine has successfully dismantled the two foundational pillars of Vladimir Putin's military strategy: overwhelming numerical manpower and absolute strategic depth. Russia's manpower advantage has been nullified by the ubiquity of autonomous systems. Their domestic safety is gone, their territorial advance has collapsed to a fraction of its historical pace, their industrial base has plateaued, and their high command is crippled by systemic disinformation. Russia retains the raw power to inflict terrible damage, destroy cities, and slowly grind out minor tactical gains in the Donbas at an astronomical cost. But tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. Moscow is burning through its finite national wealth and human capital to maintain a fundamentally broken strategic position, while the foundational metrics of this war shift further against them with every passing month. If you want to stay ahead of the curve on global flashpoints, high-tech weaponry, and defense intelligence analysis just like this, make sure to support the channel. Thank you for watching, and we will see you on the next briefing.